Hi and hello to everyone who is listening and watching us. Welcome to the next Riga Security Forum episode, which today is dedicated to Global South and international justice under the title Global South and the Quest for International Justice. My name is Sintija. I'm a researcher at the Latvian Institute of International Affairs, and today I have a great pleasure to welcome to the discussion Dr. Adam Czarnota, who is, of course, Rector of Riga Graduate School of Law, who is a great partner for this project this year, and also very well-known legal scholar with a wide experience here in the region and also far away from our region. And in recent years, especially after invasion in Ukraine in February 2022, we saw in a wider, Western society, we started to understand that political conflicts can be resolved, of course, can be tried to resolve with diplomacy, with political tools, political mechanisms, with sanctions, economic tools. But we also saw that international law plays a huge role in that, looking for the ways how to hold accountable those who have done, for this current example, war crimes in Ukraine, and there is already warrant outside an international criminal court calling for Putin to be accountable for those crimes that took place there. Very recently, after Hamas' brutal attack on Israeli land and Israeli citizens after October 7th, we again are seeing that together with the questions of self-defense, together with the questions of political and diplomacy visions, there is a place for international law, and there is a place how to deal with the situation when it comes to international law, and not just the political responsibilities, but also legal responsibilities are on the ground in those both cases. But somehow it seems to me that for those cases in a way are a bit different. Our approach, Westerner approach, is a bit different in those two regards. And we can speak about Global South because this is the topic, but for us today. But in general, probably it's something, us here in the West and our perception of the international justice, and then they, who are a bit farther away from us. And then if we have to resolve the issues that are a bit farther away from us, we tend to, be much more flexible when it comes to international justice. So the first question for you would be, how do you perceive the current state of international justice globally? And how far does it stretch? And is there one common understanding of the term itself, probably?
Well, very good question, and important question, it seems to me, but let's start maybe with it's possible to give answer on two levels, right? One is a normative level, which usually lawyers do with such stuff. It means they deal with how it should be, right? And that's easy to say because there are some international treaty, UN Charter, and so on. And on this normative level, let's regulate the type of the relation between the states. But on the other, let's say, descriptive empirical level, the situation is totally different, right? As a socio-legal scholar, it means what interests me is sort of the mixture between one and another one. So your question was about this Global South. It means, well, maybe the shortest answer would be such that ICC, International Criminal Court, doesn't have a good opinion, especially in African countries, which means the Global South countries. Why is so? Because it's a perception of the ICC in the Global South, actually, is as an institution which is totally controlled by the so-called West and impose the Western point of view. And none of the Western leaders, let's say, or the people responsible for some sort of the violation of war crimes or the violation of human rights was made accountable by ICC. Only some people from African countries, like from the Global South. Therefore, Global South attitudes towards so-called international justice, as you mentioned here, is rather like a justice imposed, rather, by the West on the other parts of the world.
But even though if it's justice imposed and it's more in our interest to have the international justice on those regions, on global south, what are the interests of those countries to cooperate with us within the United Nations, under United Nations roof, under different other institutions? Are there any demand, probably then from their perspective, to cooperate with us in those regards? What they are getting from being justice one way or the other?
Well, probably the answer will be from my perspective, why they cooperate, why they function actually in these international institutions, will be such that it's better to be part of something than to leave, and then the decision will be taken without them, right? So it's a sort of the minimal answer. At the same time, you mentioned, let's say, well, those countries from the global south, their demand for the international justice, it is much more connected with the global sort of the allocation of power than with only norms of international law, right? What I mean by that is that, well, as long as there was a bipolar division of the world, right, that was a different concept of justice from the, let's say, one part or another part. Now we are moving more towards a multi-dimensional type of the division of global power, and probably because of this multi-dimensional division, then possibly will be the much bigger role played by the international law rules and norms.
Mm-hmm. And you touch upon the history aspect that kind of affected the choices of different region. Is there any other key historical factors, cultural factors that affect, and of course when we speak about Global South, it's huge regions starting from Latin America, Africa, Middle East, and then to Far East Asia as well. It's of course different, wide and difficult to kind of comprehend it all under the one title, but nevertheless about those key factors who have influenced, you know, regional choices or international attitudes in general. Do you see something that is worth highlighting in history?
Well, the first thought that is coming to my mind actually is a colonization, right? It means colonization of what is called now Latin America and Southeast Asia or African countries. It looks like that probably the best way to explain is given by Immanuel Wallenstein, right? When he made this world system, system theory, and when he make a distinction between the three different types of states as such, that is the core states, semi-peripheries, and peripheries. And it happens actually that when we look now today, the 21st century, then basically only few countries join this core, right? I don't want to say capitalist core, but it is connected with economical power and of course military power and the political power on the global scale. But majority of countries of the global south, they were on the peripheries and they are still on the peripheries, right? With, as I mentioned before, with few examples or few exceptions, like let's say Japan, right? South Korea, which jump basically from the total periphery to the center, right? At least the economical global power center. So that's, but cultural factors, I don't want to stress too much the cultural factors. Why? Let me maybe explain it all by using some examples. That we talk about the universal human rights, right? Discourse. And quite often some people are saying that, well, the concept of the universal human rights is a mistake because we have to take into account some peculiarities of the system, let's say, and then what it means that, well, in some situations, in some countries, there should be much softer approach for the abuse of human rights. But who is telling that? Those people who are basically in the very well-off position. If we ask somebody who left prison, right, and ask about the value of the universal human rights discourse, then this person will confirm, no, it's very important, and we should stick to this universality of human rights. Mm-hmm. So that's why it seems to me that the cultural differences, they are important, of course, but they are not that decisive factor, and still this universality of norms is something which is important and should continue, right?
Thank you very much. And you mentioned the economy, which is very important also when we think about the huge gap that we are having between us and them, the rest of the world, and global South. And one of the goal of international justice is to ensure accountability for some of the most serious crimes, as we can also refer to those cases that I mentioned: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, torture, but not only. It's also one of the missions is to try to protect poor or third world countries, if we would like to say, from violence, from that are in a way result of that they are in a periphery and have been there probably ever since they know themselves. And then we have the concept of globalization, and here in the West we know the globalization from many good things, developed economies, developed technologies, developed knowledge, etc., but also at the same time it comes together with economic inequality. When we speak about us and the rest of the world, right? So what are continuing the idea that you raised about the peripheries, about the role of economy developments, what are the critical perspectives of globalization that sometimes here from the West we tend not to see? And what role does it play? What roles does the international institutions play? Because this is one of the mechanisms that combines, most of the actors around the globe, and as a colonial, power, more or less, in the Europe. Do you think it is really our responsibility to look towards those issues, to try to resolve towards those issues regarding the inequality, regarding the violence, regarding the instability for the global South or specific regions within?
Well, that's one of the crucial issues, it seems to me, before the global society, so in such a way, facing global society, but so far nobody has any idea how to solve the problem, right? Because you started with violence, let's say, that violence in the global South. It's true that if you look, let's say, in Myanmar, former Burma, there is violence, right? And if you look, let's say, in African countries, there is violence in society. In the interest of the world, actually, is to stop this violence, right? But how to do it? It seems to me that the answer is not a question of the international law norms, because they are, again, the normative level, how it should be. They could guide our intentions as such. But the issue is how to solve, actually, these economical inequalities, and so to speak, exploitation of the global South countries by the core countries, global core countries. From my perspective, it means the person who actually convinced me the most, because your question was from the institutional point of view, what to do, was given by the Sri Lankan scholar, really fantastic, it seems to me, scholar, who was extremely critical, and his name is Kanishka Jayasuriya. And Kanishka Jayasuriya, he wrote a few articles, and later on, if I remember, also a book about this, when he described basically that there are two types of the processes. One of the process was that sort of the institutionalization of what he called global economical constitution, right? And then this process is not parallel or connected with the creation of the global political institutions. So it means that between them is gap as such. And the question he asked, actually, was not a question about the creation of the world government, because quite often people say, oh, let's create a world government. I think it's a very bad idea, right? It means a world government is almost impossible to do, but even if will be created, then with big costs for the global citizens of the globe. But what he actually asked the question, if it's possible to introduce a global rule of law, it means to make this core economical actors accountable for their actions. And at the moment, if we look at the empirical picture, actually, there are no such institutions. It means there are such institutions for the violation of human rights, or let's say for the genocide, war crimes, but for the economical exploitation, the abuse of economical power in relation to this not very powerful, we don't have such institutions at the moment. Therefore, this gap between the global south and these core countries, right, it seems to me still growing rather, not smaller, but the gap is extending itself, right?
And that's very good, hearing the perspectives from the academical field. Do you have the feeling that politicians in national levels or in EU level, all transatlantic, whatever, in wider Western communities, do they feel the risks that you were just explaining? Are they aware of the reality that is on the ground in this regard?
Well, a realistic answer would be such that, of course, they are. That means, but they represent. It means this gap is in their interest, actually, right? It means in the interest of the core countries is to keep their position. Therefore, this gap is functional from the point of view of the core countries. Look, maybe from the environmental justice point of view. Okay, we, let's say, try to, in the West, so-called, we try to put a pressure to save Amazonia or the forests, let's say, rainforests around the globe. Because of what? But this environmental damage, right? But at the same time, it's nothing which has been done, actually, in exchange for those people to preserve this rainforest in the other parts of the world. Why it's not done? Because precisely of the, interests of the core countries. It means what the politicians in the core countries, this so-called West, want to do is, the first, keep their global domination, and the second, to keep the standard of living of the people in the West, right? And how to do it? Well, if there will be shift of access to resources to the global south, then immediately will be that standard of living, right, and the global position of the so-called world of the West will diminish. It will be much lower, right? Therefore, so is a realistic approach. It means politicians knew about it, and there is on the verbal level, rhetorical level, they will, of course, put nice slogans, but on the actual politics level, they will keep this distance, right?
You mentioned the term global domination, and then it somehow resonated to me. There are a lot of risks and challenges across the globe that we can face and tackle, nationally or regionally. But then there's the climate change, for example, that are affecting very much, especially global south and in Africa. And we here in Europe or wider West, we will face the consequences that will bring to us. And in my mind, that kind of challenges requires cooperation between whole globe, at least not if not from the whole globe, then at least from the biggest part of it. And how do you put that together, this necessity for global domination from, let's say, Western powers with the challenges that we are actually forced to face and tackle all together? Is there any way that you can combine those issues?
I'm not sure if I could combine these two issues, but let's look maybe at from the time perspective, right? What is the time perspective of the politicians? Do they think in the perspective of 100 years? I don't think so, right? Usually they look from the perspective of the electoral cycle. So it's 4 or 5 years, right? And the next 4 or 5 years. So the longest maybe 15, 20 years, right? If you look at the environment, then the perspective is what is necessary is to adopt a much longer perspective. Let's say something like, let's say, maybe I should use the expression which was invented by the Ferdinand Brodel, longue durée, right? Long time perspective. And it is being done by whom? By the environmental activists only, but not by the politicians, right? So that, it seems to me, the time perspective could put together these differences of the politicians and you know, the need basically for the solving globally environmental problems.
In that regard, in your opinion, what should be the priorities for policymakers, let's say in the West, in activists and scholars even in this field? What would be their priorities to tackle the gap that we are having between us and them, or us and the global South? Priorities probably for each of them. What would be your suggestions?
Oh, to give answer to this question, you know, require probably the fortune teller, right? But I am not a fortune teller, and therefore, let's try maybe a bit analytically think. I think that we, not with the politicians at the moment, but let's look from the point of view of what is called civil society, right? The most important, it seems to me, issue is a change of what some people who work on the global South called the change in epistemology, epistemic change. Right? It means that to go outside nation state, small or big, but nation states here, and see the global problems. How to do it? There is possible probably only one answer which came so far to my mind is education. Right? Education starting from the, you know, kindergarten and never finishing, actually, up to the old age, to make people aware that they are not isolated in their small, you know, blocks, but they are part of the global world. Then the second is part of the education. I don't think about the education in the classical sense that, you know, textbooks or the lectures, but contacts with others, right? But how to organize the contacts, how to take somebody, let's say, to Brazil and to show the damage done to the environment in part of Brazil, right? Well, so traveling, but at the same time traveling is to what? To fly there on the airplane. Flying on the airplane is a damage done to the environment. And then we are in the vicious circle again, right? Politicians, you know, that's require probably some statement. You know, the people who are not only politicians, but they are, you know, these big figures with the view, but such people require support, right? It means, and this support is coming from whom? Only from the people who only think about their citizenship, not as the citizens of the globe, but the citizens of the particular country. It's not enough, actually, it seems to me. So how to get from this, you know, from this close circle? I have no idea, actually. It seems to me that it's educate, make people aware. And I see there's some, you know, positive signs that plenty of younger people, actually, they are much more aware about the environmental, proper environmental behavior than myself. Right? It is done by my kids, by my grandchildren, to me, that don't do this because it's damaging environment. Right? But at the same time, it's extremely difficult because it will require the radical cut in the standard of living of all people around the globe, right? And especially those in this rich, you know, global core countries.
Exactly, and all those decisions are very directly affected by national governments, but about their position and their views, as you said, for short term rather than in a long term, and of course it affects also the societies that live within the nations. And just to conclude our discussion today, it's very broad, very wide. Of course, I understand, and there are more questions than there are answers, of course, at this point. But as I started with examples of Russian invasion in Ukraine and Israeli-Hamas war, what kind of violations of international law do you think it is crucial and necessary today to address us as a global West nations? That's crucial, you know, in any way, in order to save the face, you know, in order to save the position, whatever you name it. You know, what are the crucial elements? What we should address, and then for conclusion, you know, it's time of that time of the year when we are celebrating the light. Probably your wish to our audience for the next years, how to perceive, how to look towards the global south, general, you know, challenges that we are facing for the next year.
Right, so let's maybe start with the first part of your question. The first, that's to stop the war everywhere, right? It seems to me. War is also the damage to the environment, and enormous damage. So to stop the war, but as you see now, it's easy to say, more difficult to implement it. Why? Because of the conflicting interest on the global scale. So again, it's such that what I wish actually for the coming year and year after next and so on for the next century is that this egoism of the so-called raison d'etat of the particular states, right? They should be sort of restricted, right? And taking into account this that we are living on the same planet, right, and in the same globe. So that's something which it seems to me should be that the starting point should be the end of the use of coercion in relation to the others.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Adam. Adam Czarnota, Rector of Riga Graduate School of Law, was our guest today. Thank you very much for following us, watching us. You can watch the video as you are probably watching right now here, but you can also, of course, listen to our podcast sessions on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Thank you very much, and I'll see you around.
Thank you.